Okay, guys. First thing you got to do for 58 is draw a T-chart on your left-hand side. One side of the T-chart is going to be justified. The other side will be not justified. And remember, only use the top half of the page because you're going to need the bottom half to answer the left-hand side question. All right? Good to go? Okay, so this is where we're starting with today. To what extent were actions taken by the federal government on the home front during World War I justified? Yesterday you looked at 57. And 57 was about why we got involved in World War I. Now we're involved, and now the government's going to act. All right, we have to fight a war in Europe, so they're going to do certain things to get the home front organized and ready for war. All right, so the first thing they're going to do is the government is going to grab control of the economy. All right, they're going to set goals for factories. They're going to control the use of raw materials. They're going to encourage less fuel and food use. They're going to do a whole bunch of things to get the consumer economy moving towards a war economy, right? So changing factories that might have made one product to making products that are good for war. Ammunition, rifles, whatever it might be. So here you have a bunch of posters that were produced by the government. Be patriotic, sign your country's pledge to save food. Don't overeat. Save your food, don't waste. Those are the kind of things they wanted because any food that wasn't used in the home front could be used on the war front, all right, to feed not only the United States soldiers, but soldiers from the Allies themselves. Raise your own vegetables, right? If you can raise your own vegetables, then you don't have to worry about buying them from some farmer. And the farmer's vegetables can go out into the war front. Eat less wheat, meat, sugar, and fats, right? We want to save that for our army and the Allies themselves. All right, so that's where we're at. So the government takes control of the economy and tries to get people to ration food, eat less, eat certain things so that the soldiers can get the food that they need. We're going to also save electricity, right? Because at that time, electricity was coal-driven. Need coal for the war effort. We need to shut the lights off and make sure that we have enough coal for the war. And lastly, we need coal miners to mine more coal. And I love this poster because stand by the boys in the trenches. And then you have all these different languages. So all the newly arrived immigrants know what the goal is, right? We want to get these immigrants into these mines, and we want them to help us win the war. In order to fund this huge war effort, right, we have to get money for it. So what the government begins to do is sell bonds, right? They sell a Liberty bond, it was called. They were going to sell bonds to private citizens, and the money that they gained from selling the bonds, they would use for the war effort. Why would someone buy a Liberty bond? They were patriotic, and also the Liberty bonds had a little bit of interest. So maybe at the war's end, if you bought a $25 Liberty bond, you might get $27 when you cashed it in. So you made a little bit of interest, but it also helped the war effort. So real quick, looking at these two posters, you got Beat Back the Hun, the German, with the Liberty bonds. And this one's a pretty impressive one here. Because this is a representation here of the Statue of Liberty, right? That liberty shall not perish from the earth by Liberty bonds. So, if we don't do something to help promote the war effort, we're in danger. Okay, the New York City's on fire. There are planes in the air. There's a German submarine down here. The Brooklyn Bridge in the background. All these things are in danger if we don't work together to win the war. Propaganda, okay? We need soldiers for the war. We also want to make sure that people understand that the Germans are not human, right? It's easier to fight somebody you don't believe is human. I do want to go over a couple things with these two posters. Okay, obviously this one, the Mad Brute, he's a guerrilla, just like we looked at when we did the Spanish-American War. Very, very similar, but here you see him. He's walking on America now, all right? They've made their entrance into the United States. And remember, that was a far-fetched idea. The Atlantic Ocean separates us from Germany. They're having enough troubles in Europe, but it is an effective tool to get people to enlist in the U.S. Army. And lastly, I think this was a pretty interesting one. Remember, you got to look at it in total before you look at it in sections, right? And the importance of this is that these young men are going off to war while this young man is on the other side of the window, and he's not going off to war. And it shows him as being pretty well dressed. And I think the importance of that is to say, hey, everybody has to get involved, not only the working man, but the rich as well. All right. Another way in which the government organized the United States Home Front was the draft, the Selective Service Act, right? You're being selected to serve. So it's not as a negative connotation as the draft would be. All right. So here are some posters. Obviously, the one to the far right, the I Want You, is pretty famous. But the idea that now the United States government can pluck you out of your home and send you off to war. All right. That is definitely a taking away of your own personal liberty. So the government's power is getting stronger. They're running the economy. They're drafting. They're using propaganda. The government is getting stronger and stronger at the expense of personal liberty. The government passes 2 laws, the Espionage and Sedition Acts, all right? These laws prohibited interfering with the military draft and making false statements. So you couldn't protest against the draft. If you were, you could be arrested. We're going to talk about a case like that in a second. It forbid Americans from using disloyal, profane, and abusive language regarding the U.S. government, the flag, or armed forces during times of war. So if you were an anti-war protester at the time, you had to be careful. You couldn't say any disloyal things because you would be arrested, and people were. So these laws curbed free speech and free press as a way of getting everyone on board for the war effort. So again, the government's getting stronger, and individual freedoms and liberties are becoming, they're getting less, right? We don't have as many individual liberties as we once had before the war. So here you go, quiet criticism of society is not free speech. We're not even talking about, telling secrets about the war effort. Just criticizing the war effort was enough that you could get in trouble. Free speech doesn't mean careless talk, all right? So, again, personal freedoms are being limited for the war effort. All right, this is the case I started. This is an important one we're going to spend a little bit of time on, but we'll go over and over again before the end of the year. Schenck versus the United States. So Schenck, he handed out pamphlets against the draft. And basically, it was a protest against the draft, told people to resist it and not allow themselves to be drafted. It violated the Sedition Act. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that his actions represented a clear and present danger, that not all speech is protected. The example used in the court case was that if you were to walk into a crowded movie theater and yell fire, and there was no fire, you endangered the public, you endangered people, that's not protected speech. Either is protesting the draft during war. So you represent a clear and present danger with your speech, it can be limited. So the importance of the case is freedom of speech is not absolute, and that wartime restrictions of freedoms are constitutional. So these two things are big, right? Freedom of speech is not absolute, and your wartime restrictions of freedoms are constitutional. So they can, according to the Schenck case, the government can take away your rights during times of war. So you're going to take the information, right, that we just did. Were actions taken by the federal government on the home front during World War I justified? So you're going to go through the ideas that we just mentioned, right? The draft, government control of the economy, the Espionage and Sedition Acts, propaganda. Are those things justified or not justified? And you should have them on a T-chart as we're going through it and decide. And then you're going to make a claim. Either these actions were justified or you think they were not justified. Why do you believe it? And then use details from the PowerPoint to answer the question and put that at the bottom of the page underneath your T-chart. All right? Good luck.